Hi, my name is Virginia Mabey, and I'm going to be speaking to you today on barefoot running. But before I get started, I want to tell you a little bit about myself, not to brag or boast about what I've done, but to let you know that I speak to you from experience. I have done sports all my life. I was on the high school soccer and tennis teams, all-star teams, played a little bit in college, and in my 20s I ran a marathon to lose a little baby weight that I gained from having a baby, and I loved it. And I started racing half marathons and 10Ks, 5Ks. I got into triathlons, duathlons, 180-mile relay races, you name it. I loved it, and I became a personal trainer and did that for about 12 years, and was also a high school soccer coach at that time. And so I spent a lot of time helping others get into athletics and working with athletes. And I was always looking for new ways to be stronger and better at the sport you're doing. And even today I'm still on a co-ed adult soccer league and play tennis once a week with my tennis partner. And I love staying active and running and racing. And that is why I got into barefoot running a few years ago, because if you're an athlete, you know that you're always running into injuries. And I was tired of being injured, and I came across barefoot running, and that is why I am speaking to you on barefoot running. So let me start with a little history. We all know that barefoot walking, running has been around since the beginning of man. Ancient tribes in Africa, they developed hunting techniques where they would run and run miles and miles, even days at a time, to hunt down their prey. The deer, the antelope, gazelles, they would chase them down until they literally ran themselves to death. But the humans have an amazing ability to recover on the run because of our lack of hair, our sweat glands to regulate body temperature. We can keep going. But most importantly, our body, we know that our body is designed to be able to run barefoot naturally. And these ancient tribes, they didn't have high-tech running shoes or even minimalist ones. They had barefoot or a piece of leather, and that's it. The really neat thing is that even today there are Indian tribes in Mexico called the Tarahumara Indians who still run barefoot today. They'll run 100-mile races with a piece of tire rubber tied to their feet. It's just amazing. A lot of you may have heard of this book, Born to Run, written by Christopher McDougall. And he wrote this in 2009, and that's when this barefoot craze really started exploding. And in this book, he talks about his experience being injured and doctors telling him he's never going to be able to run again, and he didn't want to live with that. So he started researching ways that he could run without being injured, and he came across the barefoot running and this modern day Indian tribes in Mexico that still run barefoot. And he went down there, he did a lot of research and put into practice barefoot running and went and ran with them. And his experiences in here are very interesting to read about if you're looking into barefoot running. But because of these Indians today that are still running barefoot, we know that we are capable of doing it, and maybe that's the key to running injury-free. My personal experience, I've always had one injury or another, and most of the time it's because when my running shoe starts to break down. And it seems like we as a running community have really become dependent and reliable on the running shoes. And when they start to break down, we get these injuries, knee injury, hip injury, back starts hurting, and we know, oh, it's time to go buy another running shoe. And when they're $120, $150 a pop, that can add up. And when you're running hundreds of miles, you're buying 2 pairs at least every year, if not more. And I wanted to find a new way to be able to run without being injured. Uh, the running shoes have really only evolved over the last, 50, 60 years. We have Olympic, our Ethiopian runners, Haile Gebrselassie and Abebe Bikila, hard to pronounce that name. They ran their Olympic events barefoot, not with highly developed Nike running shoes or with all this extra high-tech development. They literally ran barefoot, and this was only recently. And then the shoe companies started developing all this running clothes and shoes and wanted these athletes to endorse it, and we as athletes want to run better and want to perform better, so we run out and buy the newest gear. And I feel like, well, it looks like we have just become too dependent on it. The advantages of running, there are advantages and disadvantages of barefoot running. And some of the advantages of barefoot running that I have experienced is that when you run barefoot, try to remember or picture yourself doing a couple jumping jacks, okay? When you do your jumping jacks, you're not clonking on your heels, you're up on the balls of your feet like this. And when you're doing that, you are engaging all of the bones, the tendons, the ligaments, all the way from your toes, all the way up your knees, your hips, up to your neck. Your core is strong. Everything gets is engaged and becomes stronger. If you tried to do 20 minutes of jumping jacks, you just couldn't do it. And when you barefoot run, I wish I could have you all stand up, do some jumping jacks. If we were outdoors, I'd have you run around a little bit, and you would start to feel that natural, your natural ability to run barefoot. And you feel your calves, your muscles, everything is engaged, and you become much stronger. And when that happens, you have less injury. When we're running on these highly developed running shoes, we start to rely on the extra cushion, the extra support, and it allows us to start landing on our heels, which is the body's natural, the natural brake, and on top is the natural wheel of the body. And when you're hitting back here, you get a lot of jarring up in your knees and your hip, your back, and then that's what starts causing injuries. And when that breaks down, that causes more injuries. So advantages of running barefoot is overall your body gets a lot stronger. And now some disadvantages of running barefoot. A study was done that was printed in the Sports Medicine Journal by Kelly Curry and Matkin called Barefoot Running, Does It Prevent Injuries? And in this study, they did x-rays of runners that they studied over a period of time, and the runners who were running barefoot, who were transitioning properly at a very slow rate and increasing properly, compared to runners running on their regular running shoe, were much higher, had a higher susceptibility to stress fractures and compared to the regular runners. And naturally your body, when it has a lot of stress like that, it will, your bones increase with fluid, which increases your chance of getting a stress fracture, but that also helps to strengthen your bones. Your body is able to build a denser or a stronger bone density. So it's, in my experience too, after I ran barefoot for over a year, I did get a stress fracture in my left foot. And unfortunately I had to stop running, let that recover a few months, and then slowly start back into it again. And as a runner, that's really hard. And a year later, I got another different type of injury. I tore a tendon in my toe, and this was because of barefoot running. I had other injuries in the past, my IT band, and that's a common injury with runners. And but once I started barefoot running, all my hip, my knee, my IT band injuries went away. However, the disadvantage was I eventually got a stress fracture, eventually got a tendon injury, and so I was kind of trading one group of injuries for another group of injuries. And all of that is just because over the years of my running, I've become dependent on these running shoes, and my bone density and tendons have become weakened. And so it does take time to build that strength back up. I don't run strictly barefoot anymore. I run in a minimalist type of barefoot shoe that gives me enough cushion here, just enough to protect me from the elements, rocks, sticks, rain, snow, but it still allows me room and the lightness of running barefoot. Now, so if there's any of you who want to try to run barefoot, the way to transition into that is, number one, most importantly, is to transition very slowly. If you go too fast, you won't be able to walk for a week or two. It's very painful. You want to start by transitioning once a week is good enough. Now, you might ask, do I need to go out and buy a $100 pair of the barefoot running shoes or minimalist shoes to start barefoot running? No, you can go down to your park, go to your high school baseball field, take off your shoes and run a couple laps. Just by doing that, you will feel that your natural ability to run barefoot. Do that once a week, and you will feel it in your legs, and you'll realize how weak you actually are. Even if you're a racer, a half marathon runner, you'll realize how much you've actually been depending on that. So you want to run slowly. Start off by once a week, maybe gradually increasing the amount of laps you're doing, never increasing more than 10%, and maybe after a couple months moving it to 2 days a week. You have to remember that you haven't run barefoot for years and years and years and years, unless you're a teenager here. But your body hasn't been going barefoot, so you need to remember this. It will take time to gradually get into that. And most importantly, be aware of your body, how it is reacting to barefoot running. Pay attention to any kind of injuries or the way it's feeling. And even if you're like me and you feel great and you're increasing your barefoot running and you're running 6 to 8 miles barefoot, which is where I was at, and I didn't feel any pain at all, and then one day I got a stress fracture. So even just being aware that even if you feel good, know that your feet at that time are becoming susceptible to stress fractures, and you still need to be very careful and take it easy for as long as you can. To recap, we have gone over some advantages and disadvantages to barefoot running, and we've also gone over some ways to transition appropriately into barefoot running. And in conclusion, I want everybody to close your eyes. And now I want you to picture or remember when you were a child and you were running barefoot. Whether you were having a race with your buddies, or you were running across the street to get the ball, or running through the park. Remember when you ran barefoot and the way the hard ground felt under your toes. Now open your eyes. When you were running, were you worried about your stance or the right posture or your breathing rhythm? Were you worried about the right kind of shoes you had on? No, you just got up and ran. And when I watch my little girls run to the neighbors or run down the street, they just get up and they run naturally the way their body's designed to. They run up on the balls of their feet, and it's the correct way. And as they get older, we start telling the kids that they have to have a good running shoe to be able to run. And so it starts at that early age that we become dependent on these running shoes, and it always leads to injury. And I just want to thank you for letting me speak to you, and I'll answer any questions that you might have to the best of my ability, and good luck.